Welcome, everyone. I'm Jason Friedman, CEO of Friedman Associates. I'm joined by Amy Szabo, who is our Chief Experience Officer and one of the, I believe, preeminent experts in all things CDFI certification and applications. Nadia Dubiani, our Director of Client Success, and Joanna Winchester, one of our longtime senior associates, helping us out today for preparing for the new ACR, what CDFIs need to know now. So just a quick bit of housekeeping. As always, we're recording. So you will get a follow-up auto-generated email with the slides and the recording. We will use the Q&A function, right, to ask questions. So please go ahead and we'll be working as best as we can to answer them throughout the webinar and have time at the end, right, for questions. We want to learn a little bit about you, our clients, and their interested folks. And so we're going to use Mentimeter, which I know a lot of folks are comfortable with now. And so we can ask some questions and we can use the Q&A for answers. Okay, so let's get to the agenda. Oh, wait, we got the Mentimeter slide.
That's next, I think.
Next, all righty. So, okay, so who are we? Tell us a little bit about you. We'll tell us a little bit about us. We want to provide the context today. What is this new annual certification report and why is it really a game changer as far as compliance is concerned for certification? We'll cover with you very briefly what is new about it and give you a sense of that because it's gone to a very complicated reporting format right now. And as we always do in these webinars, it's designed to give you practical suggestions, resources, and tips. Just it's part of our ethos and our identity to share as much information as we can with everyone in the field. And of course, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So there we go. That's where we want to link up with Mentimeter. You can use the website and the code, or you can use the QR code. Okay, and what we'd like to know is, let's start off with capital sources. What's your certification status? All right, so not yet certified under the old guidance, the current guidance, or certified under the new guidance. So just give us a sense of where you sit right now, so we make sure we got the right people in the room. And we'll just give that another minute. I know it's 140 plus people right now, so we'll let it run for another minute just to give a sense. For those of you that are not yet certified, this will be something coming along the lines once you do hit that benchmark. So, all righty. So, okay. So we'll see. Just give it another 30 seconds. Just don't be shy. Remember who you are. Here you go. Okay. So we're seeing here, at least at this point, that fair number of folks who are certified under the old guidance, and we do have some under the new guidance, which is fabulous. So let's go to the next question, which is, who are you? What is your role? What is your job with your CDFI right now? Getting a sense of where you're coming into this. And so finance manager, controller, compliance manager, operations manager, director, commercial manager. I'm not going to read them all, but you've got them. So just click off who you are. It's just nice to see what the mix is of folks that want to do a deep dive into the new ACR. And our job is hopefully to avoid getting combat pay from your boss. All right, we're sorting. Wow, this is working hard. All right. Okay.
Great.
Operations and finance and executive leadership, leading the charge. Director of lending. Oh, this is great. It's nice to see a variety of folks here. Obviously, if folks you're doing data analysis, you may also be tasked with handling compliance in your shop. So props to you for doing, as everybody, more than two or three things at a time. So, okay, it gives
Right.
us a good sense. Okay, so let's jump to it very briefly. Here we are. This is about the ACR and not about us, but we are Friedman Associates. We're an 18-year-old consulting services firm exclusively for small business, affordable housing, and commercial facilities developers, loan funds, and we build and grow remarkably successful CDFIs that finance a more inclusive and equitable economy. And broadly speaking, we focus on the three areas that you focus on from the moment that you hit your morning cup of coffee till you put your head down on the pillow: financial sustainability, enduring capacity, and mission impact. And so, how do we do that? Well, we are basically two sides of a coin, as we'll see in the next slide. Um, the bottom line is that on the one side of our shop, which is where we focus today. We focus on certification, compliance, and capital access. I've been done 150 recertification applications just in the last 2 years. And so that's where Amy drives our team with Nadia, certification, compliance, and capital access. And then also on the other side is our growth impact services, where folks, we get under the hood to help build strong loan fund operations, whether that's state-of-the-art credit policy, portfolio management, underwriting handbooks, deep dive evaluation of loan fund operations to prepare for scaling up, staff training, and then, of course, what's on everyone's mind today is how do we diversify our funding, increase sustainability, and capture all the new opportunities. And many of you are in growth mode. We're looking at new products, markets, and we start just like with the big shops, the big boys and girls. Let's look at feasibility. Let's look at the market and the business plans, and then strategic planning and implementation coaching. So that's us. That's it. We have a great team here. We're going to have Amy take it away right now and get into the fun part.
Thanks, Jason. Um, thanks everyone for joining us today. We have a little bit of a technical difficulty if you're joining late. Chat seems to be disabled even though it says it's enabled. So we're going to use Q&A for questions, post questions throughout as you have them, and Nadia and Joanna are going to help me kind of moderate those questions. But also, there are a couple places during the presentation where I'm going to be asking you some questions, and just go ahead and use the Q&A to answer those questions as well. We'll fix this for the next time that we do it, but it doesn't look like chat is working. But Q&A is ask questions, use that to interact with us and with each other. But yep, Jason's right. I get to take care of the fun, talk about the fun stuff today, um, which most people would, they think about CDFI certification and compliance and would not call that fun, but I kind of enjoy it. But the first thing I want to talk about is what the ACR is and why it's important to you all as certified CDFIs or emerging soon to be certified CDFIs. So the ACR is the CDFI Fund's annual certification and data collection report. And it is foundational to maintaining your status as a certified CDFI, which is important because that's how you access CDFI fund awards. And frankly, also a lot of private funders rely on certification status to make funding decisions to you guys as well. So really important. You have to complete the ACR to stay certified. So it's used by the CDFI fund to sort of assess and monitor organizational changes as they relate to your eligibility to be or stay certified. It's also used by the fund to collect industry-wide data for policy and oversight, which is the data collection component of the name, which we often don't think about or don't talk about because it's left out of the ACR acronym. It's not ACDCR. So it is due annually. And your deadline depends on whether you're certified under the old rules pre-2024 or the new rules post-2024, and you guys were identifying yourself in that Mentimeter survey, whether you're certified under old rules or waiting for your new recertification decision. So if you're certified under the old guidance, your ACR is due 90 days after your fiscal year end. If you're certified under the new guidance, it's due 180 days after your fiscal year end. But I do have a red asterisk on that because the CDFI Fund has announced this year that they have not loaded the any ACRs for fiscal year end 2025 that would be due into 2026 in Amos yet. So we're all waiting for those to be loaded in Amos. Once they are loaded, organizations will have at least 30 days to complete and submit that ACR report. So really important to get started thinking about it now, because you may have only 30 days or whatever to submit it once it does open. So to stay certified, you do have to submit that report on time, but you also have to remain in compliance with the certification requirements. And I know that that sounds like a duh, like that's super obvious, Amy, but I did want to put those two things together because I think that we're very likely to see the CDFI fund being less lenient about noncompliance, either for reporting or just even meeting the tests. So I think that we've seen language coming out of the Treasury and the administration that they're cracking down on compliance. So want to throw that out there. Okay, so going to ask you guys a question and post your response in Q&A since chat isn't working. How familiar are you with the old ACR on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being I've never even seen it and 5 being I could complete it in my sleep? Go ahead and post your response in chat. And also, if you have any questions, you can post those. Sorry, post it in the Q&A. And if you have any questions, you can post it in Q&A as well.
Think we're seeing a pretty wide range, some 3s, some 4s, so 5, 1.5. So I think we're like all over the map here. Thank you guys for responding.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll try to keep that in mind as I'm
Like
moving.
the average is maybe like somewhere in the middle.
Pretty old. Good.
Got it. All right.
All right.
So we move on here. So we're going to sort of talk about the big picture differences here between the old ACR and the new ACR. We'll get into like details of those differences in just a second, but kind of overall, if we're looking at it, I think that the key concept to keep in mind is that we're shifting from a check the box compliance to ongoing documented validation of certification eligibility. So historically, the old ACR was very straightforward and required sort of minimal documentation. You would kind of walk through a series of attestations where you just simply affirmed that you continued to be in compliance with those 7 certification tests. And it also required some basic information about your organization's financials, portfolio, and development services, which was that data collection component of the report. So under the revised certification requirements, this new ACR has expanded it's grown in size from 4 to 7 sections, which we'll talk about in detail in just a second. And then really, rather than just attesting that you continue to meet the requirements, it's asking very specific questions, requiring more detailed information, and in some cases, documentation to show and to verify that you do continue to meet those certification tests. In many ways, it really closely resembles the new certification application itself, and there are even some questions that are mirrored from that new certification application. So overall, the changes, when you look at the old report and the new report, you definitely It reflects the CDFI Fund's increased focus on accountability and its commitment to sort of building a more comprehensive understanding of the industry. And it very clearly reflects the policy and data modernization changes made in that 2024 revised application and those updates that happened then. So, um, so this is just a quick kind of detailed overview section by section of what the differences are. I'm going to go through each of these sections individually over the next several slides, but as a broad snapshot. So the first four sections, sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, were also included in the old ACR. The section 1 is the only one of those four sections that has significant changes. Like I said, it's expanded to reflect the new guidance and new guidelines. Sections 2, 3, and 4 remain unchanged from the old report. But sections 5, 6, and 7 are brand new sections. And so you're going to want to start thinking about how to collect the data for those sections, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Before we do that, though, I do want to invite any of you who said, hey, I'm a 4, I'm a 5, I could complete this in my sleep. Feel free to share your lessons, tips, hacks that you've learned from completing the ACR over the years with the rest of us. So you can share that in the Q&A thing since chat's not working. We'd love to benefit from your experience here. Feel free to do that at any point as we go along. Okay, so the new ACR section by section, we're going to dive into that now. Before we do that, though, so the CDFI Fund has published sort of their lengthy, hard to access guidance, 129 pages, telling us what that new ACR is going to look like. So they published it in December of 2023, and I have confirmed with CDFI Fund staff that this is substantially what the new ACR is going to look like. They said that you may see a few wording tweaks, quote unquote, but generally that document still stands and still is what they're intending for the report to look like. So all of these details are taken from that document, which is available online. And I think Nadia is also going to post that in chat. So you can see it and grab a link to it if you need to. I won't, since I've already kind of talked about the Section 1 CDFI annual certification report detail already, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Just, those revisions are making it a lot harder for you just to say, yep, I meet the test. And I will say, when we worked with 150 organizations to prepare to submit the recertification application, we did see lots of interest in instances. It was pretty common for an organization to have been sort of attesting that they met those tests and moving on. And when we dug into the details, they weren't meeting some of the tests. They thought they were, and the report didn't require them to verify that, but that's really changed now. The way that the report is worded, it's going to ask you specific questions, not general questions, and then want you to document your answers. So that's changed. We'll see that moving forward, I think. Section 2, development services. This asks for general information about your training and technical assistance offerings, specifically how they connect to your financial products, and then how many people you're serving with development services, and how many of those recipients are target market recipients. But it is unchanged from the old ACR report, so that's good. So section 3 and 4 also are unchanged from the old ACR report. So section 3, financial data information. This just is where you enter balance sheet, income statement, and portfolio information about your organization at fiscal year end. Very pretty straightforward, not too hard to tackle. Section 4, financial products, portfolio breakdown detail. This is where you provide information about your outstanding portfolio by line of business and target market recipient. So here's a screenshot of what that report looks like. Type is line of business, and it asks for the total transactions in your portfolio based on that line of business, total target market transactions, and then the dollar amount, and then target market dollar amount is cut off here, but looks like it's always looked. So, those of you who've been doing this for years shouldn't have problems with that. But this is where it gets fun. So the next 3 sections are all new to the ACR. And since some of us are visual learners, probably a lot of us are visual learners like I am, and since the ACR has not yet launched in Amos, I can't show it to you in Amos. So I'm going to navigate to our My Fund app so you can see the data points that each section will require. We built My Fund to make CDFI applications easier for our clients, and we just launched the CDFI reporting and compliance module based on that published guidance that I showed you earlier. So navigating to My Fund, you're going to see section 5, sources of investment capital. So the purpose of this section is for the CDFI fund to understand where your loan capital or your investment capital is coming from. And they want information about every dollar that's in your loan pool right now. And I say loan, I understand that their products much broader than just loan products, but it's easier to say loan than financial product. So your kind of investment capital, where it's coming from, your loan or investment capital. And so there are a couple of data points that they're going to ask for every line here. So source of capital, type of capital, amount, and origination or receipt date are going to be asked for every line item here. And so you can see they're going to be drop downs in Amos. They're basically asking for the source of capital, where it's coming from, give you lots of options, type of capital. And they have for banks or credit unions, types of capital, debt, equity, net assets, or other retained earnings. So you choose the type of capital, and then you're always going to put the amount, and then you're always going to put the origination date, or for like grants, it's equivalent to the receipt date. But then for debt, they're also going to ask the interest rate and maturity date, and then it's going to auto calculate the remaining term in months based on the difference between today and the maturity date. Not sure why they need that remaining term, but they seem to be interested in remaining term for some reason. So this is the data points that will be requested in Amos, which I think it'll be the first time you do this, I think probably will be the hardest. Year over year, it will be much easier to sort of update based on changes, from the last time you reported. But interestingly, the information you enter in section 5 auto-fills this capital sources summary table, which provides a great snapshot of the makeup of your loan pool or your capital pool. So it looks at total, how much of that is debt. So for this example, about 74% of the total loan pool is debt. That debt is broken down here by EQ2 and other. And then also, you have the net assets in here as well. And so these all add up to 100. And then it also calculates the weighted average interest rate for across multiple lines of debt here, and weighted average remaining term in months. So I don't know, as someone who makes a case for support, or, works, across the organization, this table could actually be useful for making decisions. Hey, we're heavily weighted in debt and the interest rate is higher than we want it to be. We need to focus on finding, lower cost capital or finding equity or grant capital instead to balance that out. Or this could be a snapshot in your annual report. I feel like there are lots of things you could do with this table beyond just reporting in the ACR. Pro tip, details about debt capital can often be found in your audit notes. So that might be a great place to start when you're putting that together. Um, Section 6 and Section 7, also new sections. So the contributed operating revenue table, much fewer data points than the capital table, but it's looking for information about where operating revenue is coming from. So it's just looking for type of donor, which is the same list of donors that were offered above. Um, and then amount that you got from that donor. So this is based on operating revenue that was available in the fiscal year that you're reporting on. And then finally, loans and leases table is requesting information about the types of financial products that are in your portfolio, including weighted average interest rate across each product type and number and dollar amount. So similarly, you can add products here. So the way that the products are sort of broken up is a little weird, but I think everything's in there. And then it's asking for, if you have 10, if you have uh, 10 used vehicle loans in your portfolio, what is the weighted average interest rate across those loans? 10 of them, how much, is the total amount of those loans as well. So you can add as many as you want here, depending on the size and complexity of your organization. It could be pretty straightforward, or it could be a little less straightforward, but there you go. That's what they're looking for.
Got some questions.
Hey, Nadia, do you want to pull any questions
Yeah.
for me?
Yeah, we've got some good questions. So let me go up a little bit. Um, Pertaining to this specifically, let's start there. We've got some good questions. So for the sources of capital section, are they looking to see that government sources of capital are below a certain percent of total loan pool as a proxy for the non-governmental entity test, or not necessarily? Is this just data capturing, perhaps?
This is just data capturing.
Okay.
Um, so in section 1, you still will have to answer kind of those same non-government entity questions that you had to answer in the certification application. And honestly, just because, if more than 50% of your assets or whatever are from government sources doesn't mean that doesn't necessarily constitute government control. So yeah, this is just data capture. Nothing in sections 5, 6, and 7 are going to disqualify you as a CDFI.
Okay, that's good to know. I've got another one from Kirk. Hey, Kirk. If you've got thousands of loans, is there a way to batch upload the capital source responses, or is it going to be line by line?
So they do say, so the guidance says that you should be efficient. Um, so right, like if you have, for example, if you've have a loan pool that's from community members, there might be small amounts with, a large number of community members. They say that you can, um, yeah, you can roll that into one line item. So yeah, if you have a bunch of bank loans that have they provide specific guidance about how to be efficient in that. I think they don't necessarily want every single line item, but they do want you to like combine as many as you can.
Mhm.
When I was reading their guidance, I was like, wow, we'll see how that works in reality. Um, but it's kind of TBD. But no, there does not seem to be a way to batch upload. Um, so
And then we did get a few questions kind of asking the same thing about what time frame the report is capturing. And it's not from the beginning of your organization, it's your your most recent completed fiscal year. Is that correct, Amy?
that's correct. Yeah. So the report generally is looking at the your status at your most recent fiscal year end, but like the sources of investment table, for example, is it's looking at your entire current loan pool.
Hmm.
So if you had total financing capital of 6.2 million at your most recent fiscal year end, you would need to identify that 6.2 million in that source of investment table. But some of that you could have got 15 years ago. Some of that you might have gotten recently. So it's kind of on a case by case basis, but depending on right. These are the first four sections are all about like fiscal year end. Loans and leases is looking at the types of loan products that are in your current outstanding portfolio. And the contributed operating revenue is looking at the operating revenue that was available for use in the fiscal year that you're reporting on.
And these are due 180 days after your fiscal year end.
Yes, if you're this report, the new ACR only applies once you are certified under the new guidance,
Mhm.
and it will normally be due 180 days after your fiscal year end. Yep.
Great. Thanks.
Yep.
And just for everyone, I'm keeping track of all of the questions that you're sending. So if we miss any in these little pauses, we will have a question and answer section at the end where we can make sure to address everything.
Thank you, Nadia.
Yep.
Okay. So I now want to move in and talk about practical steps or tips for preparing for the ACR. I always thinking like, okay, but how do I implement this? So now we know what the ACR will look like, but what should we be thinking about in order to actually do it? And so the most important thing that you can do to be ready for the ACR is to ensure ongoing compliance with the 7 certification tests. So if you take only one thing away from this webinar, I hope you take a lot more, but if you only take one thing away, this should be it. So you have to stay in compliance with the 7 certification tests, which requires understanding how those tests are measured. The old ACR was not previously set up to adequately test compliance, but the new ACR is. So it's critical that you stay compliant. So, some recommendations we have for doing that. The first one is designate an internal certification subject matter expert. The new certification requirements are a lot. I don't know, there were hundreds of published documents that, FAQs, this document took the place of that document. None of them were easy to access. And so it's not realistic to expect everyone in the organization or even many people in the organization to understand all the nuances with the certification requirements and the 7 tests. But it is reasonable to identify one person who can become that certification subject matter expert. And so they either know the answers or know where to find the answers. And then make sure that your team consults with that expert over any changes that could impact one of those 7 tests, including mission or strategy changes, addition of new financial products, changes in development services, or board or governance changes. So great idea uh, to have someone in your organization who knows the details. One thing, the other thing I would say is like there are two specific tests that seem to get misunderstood or kind of forgotten about, and that's the target market and the accountability tests. So those were the two areas that we most commonly saw. Um, Longtime certified CDFIs weren't in compliance with when we started assessing them and preparing for the new or the recertification application. So as far as target markets are concerned, um, this is something that should be widely understood across the organization. So lots of people on on your team should be able to say we're certified to serve low income targeted population in investment area target markets, and the way that we determine if a loan or financial product is directed to a low income targeted population is by XYZ. The way that we determine if it's directed towards an investment area target market is we go to the Sims mapping system and map the address and determine if the FIPS code is, it's one of the investment area pre-qualified census tracts. So um, that is something that needs to be understood, and we suggest the best way to do that is to have a written policy that identifies your target markets and aligns with the CDFI Fund's pre-approved target market assessment methodologies. So the CDFI Fund has said, in order to count a loan as a target market directed loan, you have to verify that it's target market directed using very specific means. So we would suggest documenting that, disseminating it throughout the organization, and following it. Another thing that we would say is track target market lending in real time. Um, if you're one, if you're not tracking it, one very large loan can very quickly um, skew your target market lending below the 60% requirement. So as you know, 60% of your loans every year by number and dollar amount have to be directed to approved target market borrowers. Um, Same with board. So accountability in your board is closely connected to your target markets. The fund has the new guidance gave very clear definitions of what an accountable board looks like. And so it's very easy to create a policy around that, get board approval, integrate it into your board handbook, uh, and make sure that it's used when your board composition is changing. It very important. That's one that you have to stay on top of because it's very hard to do a wholesale change of the board. It's easy to make sure that you're getting a new accountable member onto your board when an old accountable member is leaving. And I don't have this on my slide, but another kind of simple thing is put the ACR report deadline on the company calendar. The Amos sometimes sends ACR report reminders, but we've had clients who missed them, or they went to someone who was no longer with the organization or just didn't come, and lost compliance because they didn't submit their ACR on time. So a couple of very good things that you can easily do, or maybe not easily do, but you can do to help stay compliant. Um, so fun fact, did you know, or maybe not so fun fact, did you know that the new certification agreement requires CDFIs to fully recertify with the new application every 5 years? Um, you can, I don't know if you guys have React. I
Mhm.
also Yeah, if you have react with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Thumbs up if you knew that, thumbs down if you didn't. I think we'll probably see a lot of thumbs downs because this is pretty, it's buried in a long document. It's a couple sentences, and a lot of people haven't even seen that agreement. But you're going to have to go through that recertification process every 5 years now. So saying compliance is not only imperative to hold on to your certification, but it will make it easier to recertify in 5 years from now when that comes up.
You make a point,
Huh?
and you can make a point.
Sure.
Um, as Amy's been going through this and to creating a policy or a communication where everyone knows what the target market is, et cetera. We've advised all of our clients to use the recertification process as a professional development uh, uh, event. In other words, most of the time folks are not tracking in their jobs, what are the requirements when they come in and they're new employees. And this is a perfect time to bring everyone together and say, well, how we know how we're different from banks, but how do we prove that with the Treasury Department? How do we prove that with our funders? And by being able to use that application that you did, so that everyone understands this is our target market. This is how we define accountability, our products and services. It's very empowering from the person that answers the phones to the board chair. Everyone should be able to say, yeah, this is how we met the requirements of certification.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, last
Action.
substantive slide here. I have kind of an action plan for getting prepared for this ACR that's going to be coming out at some point soon. One thing that we suggest is surveying your board for accountability 45 to 60 days before your fiscal year end. You're definitely going to want to know if board members have changed jobs, have moved, if their income levels have changed, anything that would make them no longer accountable or make some of your non-accountable board members accountable. You want to know that well before your fiscal year end so you can make changes to get back into compliance if you need to. Complete the TLR, the transaction level report, early. This is technically due at 180 days after your fiscal year end as well, but it actually informs several parts of the certification application. I'm sorry, it informs several parts of the ACR report, not to mention it informs award level reporting as well. So get that done earlier in the year, and it's going to make your other reports a lot easier. Like Jason mentioned, use your recertification app, review that recertification app because it definitely informs the ACR report. And you can use that as an education piece for staff. Begin gathering data for the new sections and collecting reference documents. So I have a list of kind of pretty comprehensive list of the types of reference documents that you need to make the ACR reporting go more smoothly. Your certification letter for documentation of your approved target markets, fiscal year end financial statements, transaction level report, which I mentioned earlier. So not only does that autocomplete well, theoretically, it's supposed to autocomplete some of the target market questions in the ACR report. We'll see if that actually ends up happening in AMIS, but it's supposed to. But it informs other pieces of the reporting as well. You want your portfolio report at fiscal year end. And that portfolio report is going to be most useful if it includes kind of primary line of business of the loan, the original transaction amount, the interest rate on that financial product, the balance outstanding at fiscal year end, the status of the loan, is it current or 30, 60, or 90 days past due? And then critically, you want to make sure that it has an indicator whether it's a target market loan or that there's enough information in the document to make it determine if it's a target market loan. So that portfolio report does have to have some specific pieces of information in order to be fully useful. The development services report, how many recipients took which received which type of development services, how many of those recipients were target market, board information, and then, of course, the list of loan capital sources and operating capital sources for those new sections.
Excellent.
And finally, we can help. Um, we have some free resources that we'd like to offer to you guys for joining us today. Um, the first one is a document that we call Your Recertified or Certified Now What? And it just sort of outlines all of the compliance requirements for certified CDFIs. The ACR is one piece of that. There's actually a lot more that goes into it. So we'd be happy to send that to you, share it with you. And then we have those policy templates that I talked about, the target market verification policy and the board accountability policy templates. We developed those in clear alignment with the CDFI Fund's requirements for boards and target market assessment methodologies, have used them successfully with all of our clients, and we'd like to share them with the industry now just as a resource. So there are those free resources. We also have our My Fund app, which you kind of saw a preview of, that compliance and reporting module. So this is a paid resource, but we have kind of a wide range of options available at different price points, ranging from do-it-yourself to full service options. So would be happy to share those free resources with you or give you information about more information about My Fund. If you're interested, please just reach out to me at myfund@friedmanassociates.net. Um, that is what I have for you today. I know it's a lot, and I'm looking forward to taking questions.
One question. First of all, I want to thank you, Amy. When I introduced you up front, for those of you that don't know Amy, she is a preeminent expert in this subject matter, and I think you got that loud and clear to me. So thank you, Amy, for taking something very complicated and hitting home and getting us focused. So let's take some questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a lot of really good questions in the Q&A section. Um, we want to be respectful of your time, so I'll get through these with Amy's help as fast as we can. And let me just preface by saying, if we don't answer your question, please reach out to us via email to make sure that we do answer your questions. So we got a lot of similar questions, so let's go through this. Ryan wanted to ask, is there any indication for when the 2025 ACR might be released, or are they still just saying soon?
Yeah, there's no indication. I think it was probably 6 to 8 weeks ago that they said, it's not out yet. We'll let you know when it comes out, and you'll have at least 30 days. So no, sorry.
And we are getting a lot of questions about if this will be shared with you all. And yes, we will share the recording and or the slide deck, so everyone can refer to this information from today.
We'll send
Another, go ahead.
no, I'm saying we'll send the resources out with the deck.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Another good question from John. I'm wondering what tests were the most commonly misunderstood ones. I think that's in regards to the recertifications that we did. What were some surprises that the applicant, that they weren't meeting the requirement, that might be helpful to flag during prep? So good point. I'd say board accountability was a big one. A lot of folks, assumed that their board members were accountable, and perhaps they were under the old guidance, but we saw with the new guidance that they became much more specific and strict. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, accountability was the number one thing that
Mhm.
wasn't being met. I was pretty surprised at how many people didn't fully understand target markets. I think there was kind of a conception that target markets were about geography and not about it. Well, I mean, it gets a little confusing too, because under the old guidance, you had a target market attached to a geography. So you might be serving a low income targeted population in Franklin County, Ohio. Under the new guidance, it's just low income targeted population, and you could make a loan you could,
And
an organization in Ohio, you can make a loan to a low-income individual in Alaska, and that would count towards your target market. But
Yeah,
there,
I think the board piece and the target market piece, which is why we're going to share those policies with you guys so you can kind of see they're very clearly defined there. Um,
I
yeah,
think another thing was the fund started requiring in the new guidance evidence of board approval. And so any document, your documented primary mission, your bylaws, like they all had to have clear evidence of board approval in the form of a signature, either on a resolution or board meeting minutes, or and so that wasn't necessarily something that people were like out of compliance with before, but with the new changes, a lot of people had to dig up old documents that were, in the archives to find that, or they had to sort of get reaffirmation from their board just so they could have the signature that the fund required.
yeah. Documentation was definitely a big um, upset for some.
As a
We're getting
follow-up to that, Amy, there was some questions about specifically, do those target market policies and accountability policies need to be board approved?
So generally, no. The one that does need to be board approved is an organizational accountability policy, but only if you're using an advisory board to meet the accountability test. Um, they don't have to be board approved. Yes, other than that, they do not need to be board approved, but they're best practice. And frankly, it's probably best practice to get them board approved, or like target market verification policy, if that's something that, if you're it should go through the approval process of loan policies and procedures, whether that's an internal committee or your loan committee or your board. They should be formal and formalized documents that direct your operations.
right. Um, okay, we got a lot of questions about, and thank you, Joanna. So yeah, please continue to jump in with other questions as I'm trying to keep track of our many. Who should be using the new ACR? So we got a lot of questions of from people that are still waiting to hear back on their recertification application. Um, so Amy, can you speak
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah. So if you submitted in 2025, you probably haven't heard back about whether, not probably, you haven't heard back, at least no one we know has heard back about, has gotten a decision on that application that was submitted in 2025. So technically the new ACR only applies to organizations that have been certified or recertified under the new guidance. However, my guess is that since they haven't even opened up the old ACR in Amos yet, I'm thinking that you probably should just be preparing for the new ACR as well. And it's not going to hurt because, you know, four of those sections are, three of those sections are the same. And, you know, you're going to want to make sure that you stay in compliance anyway with that first section. So technically, you're not going to have to submit that until you're recertified under the new guidance, which I know is going through that process now. But I would say realistically, it's probably worth preparing. Um, and assuming that you'll be submitting the new ACR. I don't know why they wouldn't have released the old ACR for folks already if they were intending on using that anymore. I know I have very long-winded answers. I'm sorry.
Difficult questions require long-winded answers. Um, how about, okay, so there's a tricky question here. So a few people have asked about, there's a rumor or it was said that OTPs, so the other targeted populations, may be going away. We had a couple questions like, how is this going to affect TLRs, and compliance. Amy, can we speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so let me preface this by saying this is my best guess. So I'll put that in context. In September of last year, OFN and CDFI Connect or CDFI Coalition both made an announcement that the CDFI Fund would be getting rid of OTP, African American, Hispanic, other Pacific Islander, Vietnamese, Filipino in July or June of 2026. So at that time, everyone sort of got scared about it. However, and I'm sure that I fully trust that they had sources somewhere that told them that, but we haven't heard anything else about that. Like at this point, and in fact, I was on certification, like you know, the CDFI Fund does a monthly certification Q&A call. I was on several of those calls where CDFI Fund staff were asked that question and they said, we don't know what you're talking about. So either those conversations were being had at different levels that they weren't privy to. Bottom line is, we haven't heard anything else about that since September of last year. I'm considering that rumor status right now. And that doesn't mean that it's not a good idea to start planning for if that happens. So, just practically, if that would happen, if they would get rid of OTP African American, OTP Hispanic, these approved target markets, if they would get rid of those in the middle of this year, organizations that were certified for those, or I mean, they have in in normal circumstances, they would have to review the submitted certification applications based on the guidance that was approved and and published at the time, which is what you all submitted your applications for. So those decisions are going to have to be made on what you submitted for, on what was approved and published. So if they do get rid of those, they theoretically would have to give you a full fiscal year of lending to come into compliance with without those target markets to be able to meet the 60% test without the target markets that they're getting rid of, because that's how they measure target market compliance, which also would give you, a full, fiscal year to get your board into shape as well. So I'm not suggesting that you make any changes now. I'm suggesting you start tracking those things and
Mhm.
thinking about, like, what would we have to do to our board if they did get rid of those? How would we have to change our lending if we wanted to continue to be a certified CDFI if they did get rid of those OTPs? So, I mean, the long answer is, feels like a rumor. We haven't heard anything else about it. But that doesn't mean it's not a good idea to start, doing the calculations for what would need to happen if that
I
did
would
happen.
just parenthetically that we know that the NOFA, right, for the FATA was changed to eliminate those. So one could say, well, then they're going to align certification with that, but we just don't know yet. So uh,
Mhm.
looking in advance of some of the questions here, we have clients that were African American led, Latino led, existing CDFIs that got recertified in those current target markets under the new guidelines. And so it just shows you that things have kind of
Yep.
are stuck in that place right now. But clearly, the funding guidelines have changed, and we'll be looking. We don't expect that to be any different when the new NOFA comes out later this year. But you can always count on us. We're always pumping out updates. We are members of the CDFI Coalition. We have a lobbyist, and so when we get these updates, you get them as well.
Yep. And we'll do our best to share information as we get it, but it's always good to be prepared. I know we're out of time, but I want to pose at least one more question, if that's okay with everyone. Um, Someone asked, will Friedman Associates make the ACR in my fund available to clients? And the answer is yes. Amy did build a new module that we've just um, released for this in our My Fund tool. So if anyone is interested in that, whether you're a current client or not, reach out to us. We have an email set up, myfund@friedmanassociates.net, that you can reach out to us for information about that. And then Amy or Joanna, did you see any questions that we want to bring up? I know we're over time.
But we can stay on as long as
Okay.
want to. If they have a question they want to get answered, let's stay. That's okay, unless we've got something else going on. You good? Yeah.
I can totally stay. I mean, I understand if other folks can't, but we can get through a couple more questions if we need to. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Joanna, feel free to chime in if you saw any questions that we want to bring up. Let's see. We got some technical questions. So, if sections 5 through 7, so in the ACR, if questions 5 through 7 relate more to data capturing, will that information specifically impact the evaluation of our certification status?
No, not at all.
Okay, good. Let's see. Oh, a good question. So from Courtney, is there a certain answer that they're looking for? So in some of these answers, like deployment ratio, liquidity, again, that speaks to, I guess, like, is this all just data capturing, or is there some evaluation in how these are being answered?
Yeah, no, the data portion, really everything outside of section 1 of the application is just about capturing data, to understand the industry. My guess is that those new sections are probably going to be used to make the case for federal budget, federal budget allocations for the CDFI fund. If they can say, hey, our CDFIs are leveraging however many billion in private funding, outside of this, 365 million annual allocation for the FA program. Like that makes a really good case for Congress to allocate funding to that program. So my guess is that the new sections are really just about being able to take a report to Congress that's very strong and convincing them that the industry is really impacting the economy.
There was a really good question in here that actually may be helpful for other folks too. So, someone was saying that they had proposed an entirely new target market or a changed target market in their recertification. And they weren't sure if they should start collecting data along those lines now or if they should be waiting until they get the approval. And in this next round of ACR, like, will they have to be using that target market?
Yeah, I would assume that they went through the section 0 process to propose a new target market. You won't be officially certified for that target market until you get approval that you can use that target market, and then your certification gets approved. I don't know what kind of the order was there. I mean, if it's a group that you're serving, you probably should be collecting that information anyway, but just make sure it's segmented out in case you don't get approved for that target market. Yeah, in case you don't get approved for that target market, in time for the ACR.
And just to clarify, I think it was also just that it wasn't necessarily a target market that needed to go through section 0, but they were either adding or changing what their target market is.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yes, I would assume, as long as you had accountability to that target market, I think that you could assume that you'll be certified to serve that target market and start thinking about your ACR in that way. Yep.
Awesome. Here's another one. So for the ACR, are they identifying loans that have closed or dispersed?
So loans, So the TLR is always about loans closed, regardless of whether the funding has actually gone to the borrower or not yet. So there are other places that they separate kind of closed, bet other places where they separate committed, out of that. But loans closed is always about the dollar amount that was on that signed uh, loan note that was executed between you and the borrower. So obviously, if it's not dispersed, if it hasn't gone to the borrower, it's not going to show up in the portfolio. Uh, but yeah, so those are nuances in kind of all of the financial data stuff that runs throughout the CDFI fund. But closed is always about the dollar amount that was signed, that was committed in a signed agreement, a signed legal note between you and your borrower.
Perfect. Okay, let's see here. For the loan and leases table, what is considered a commercial loan?
I'd have to pull that. I'd have to pull that up. The TLR document does have definitions,
Okay.
though.
Yeah.
I don't know right off the top of my head, but we could find it. Sorry, not the TLR. The ACR guidance has definitions, so we could find it in there, but I don't know off the top of my
I
head.
think that was Marianne. So props to Marianne for stumping Amy on one question. Hard to do.
Yeah, it's weird because those they don't align with like the eligible financial product categories. It was kind of a weird
Right.
the way that I'm like, okay, they're looking for something here. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't align with the way that other things are classified.
Okay. A couple more technical questions. So, someone asked, will we be able to upload a spreadsheet for the donors? And also, are they asking for supporting documentation in the ACR?
No, and as no, you won't be able to sort of upload a spreadsheet. It does have to be sort of line by line, but that's where they're like combine things to make for efficiency, they've said. And uh, they're not, as far as like the loans and leases table, or sorry, as far as the capital sources table or the operating revenue table, they're not looking for documentation, just data.
But in some cases, you do have to provide some documentation, right, Amy?
It, when it relates to your certification test, you will, if there are changes from when you submitted the certification application, there are places that you may need to submit documentation, yes, but
Okay,
only in section 1.
got it. Okay, I think we covered pretty much most of the questions. If anyone is still on and we did not answer your question, again, please reach out to us. Even if it's a technical question or a seemingly small question, we want to make sure that you get the information that we're trying to share with you. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your engagement today. Really happy to be able to provide this information for you.
We appreciate you staying on, and we'll be sending out the resources. And as always, you can follow up with us. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Be well, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. How do I end this?